Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Greg Tate, one of the technical trainers here in Carlisle at the training center. Filling in for Tony Vieira today. I know he's been doing the previous webinars. Lucky for him, him and his wife just had a beautiful baby girl. So I'll be filling in today for him as he spends time with his family. Today we are doing the installation 201. So a lot of you guys probably already sat in and listened to the 101 that Tony did previously. I'm just going to continue on with that and kind of focus on the installation of our installation. Okay, so that's what we'll be getting into today. If you guys are brand new to these webinars, just kind of a recap and what we've been offering. So we've been doing these webinars, and they are small glimpses of what we kind of do actually in the training center, minus the hands-on. So if you get a chance, when things get back up and running and going back to normal, hopefully here soon, highly recommend signing up for our 100 through 500 level courses, or just our basic certification or performance classes to get the hands-on portion of these webinars. Okay. Although we're going to give you some good information in these webinars, it's always brings everything together once you're able to do some hands-on as well. So highly recommend signing up for our crew courses. Okay, but I do appreciate you signing up for the webinar today. Hopefully I cover everything that you guys are hoping for. Please ask questions. There's a question bubble to the left. Just ask your questions there. If they're easy and simple, I can answer them here on the webinar. If they're a little bit more in depth, I'll just take my time and answer them via email. But either way, you will get an answer one way or the other. So other than that, I'm going to get started here. Again, we're talking about installation 201. There we go. All right, so first things first, this is an advisory that we started sending out back in 2017, kind of geared towards our standard polyiso. Since our polyiso is pretty much 80–90% of our jobs out in the field, uses standard polyiso or standard secure shield, which is starting to become a more popular installation. When that installation gets any kind of wet or moisture to it, it's no good. All right, so we got to be very cautious and careful when handling and storage our installation on the job site. It comes on this package for transportation purposes. So there's a plastic already on it, but we still require some industrial tarp over top of that. Okay, so the three main points how insulation should be stored on a job site that the contractor should be following is: one, you want to store the bundles flat and upright with the bottom of the bundles elevated 2 inches or more above a finished surface. So a lot of guys will just take that insulation, put them on some sleepers, 2x4s, whatever, to keep off the ground, because if it rains and there's moisture and water sitting on the ground, it can ruin those couple pieces of insulation. Also, that plastic that comes on it, you gotta, before you put the industrial tarp over the existing insulation and plastic, gotta make sure that the insulation can breathe. So what you need to do is you need to slit the existing plastic that's already on it so it breathes. If you don't, what happens is, especially with the secure shield, because it's a coated glass facer, condensation and moisture can build up underneath that plastic, which in that case is getting the insulation wet, which we don't want. So you got to make sure it's breathable. And then lastly, again, you got to tarp the insulation with an industrial size tarp and keep it somewhat in place so it doesn't blow around or get damaged or anything like that. So yes, it was a concern, still is a concern. We really want to make sure our contractors are storing insulation properly. So something like this, very simple. Again, up off the ground, you can see the 2x4s they're using there. Industrial tarp. The tarp is tied down with a bungee cord or rope or whatever you guys have to keep that tarp tight. If you look on the bundles on the right, the blue tarp, you can see the plastic is still on there, right? It's that plastic that is on the insulation when it gets transported. They leave the plastic on. That's completely fine. Again, just extra protection. The only thing is you do want to make sure you do a nice slit so the insulation can breathe once the tarp goes over it, so it doesn't condensate. So that's very important. So again, like today mainly is going to involve talking about installation, right? What the contractor should be using or doing. Okay. This first slide here is showing honestly probably one of the most common scenarios, right? Especially here on the East Coast, you see a lot of steel decks. You do see wood decks, and you still see a lot of concrete decks as well. But I think we start off with this side because this is a very common scenario. So what this is showing is, again, steel deck, wood deck. The plate in the middle is probably our bread and butter plate. This is the plate you'll see for insulation attachment almost on all your jobs. We do offer other plates. We have an AccuTrack plate, which is a kind of a productivity booster plate. Basically, you got to use a machine gun, whatever you want to call it, from OMG, and basically it kind of shoots the fastener and plate. So it keeps you off, keeps the contractor off their hands and knees. You don't see it too often, but we do offer that plate. And then we have another plate called our Secure Fast plate, which has a special coating on it, so it doesn't corrode, rust, or anything like that. It just has a special coating. But all three insulation plates perform the same though. When it comes to like the fastening patterns and all that, nothing changes there. So going back to what you see in the front of you here, that 3-inch plate is pretty much our bread and butter. It's our most common plate we offer. Now, when it comes to steel decks and wood decks, the fastener fasteners are going to change depending on what kind of deck type you're roofing over. So steel and wood, again, a very common scenario. You're probably going to need to be using our HP fastener or our Insultite fastener. The Insultite fastener is a little bit more cost friendly. I believe it's a little bit more on the cheaper side of things, but the HP fastener, because the HP fastener can be used for membrane securement and insulation securement, you tend to see the HP fastener used a lot more with the insulation fastening plate, because the Insultite fastener is only good for insulation attachment. You would not be able to use that for membrane securement. So there's some of the differences between the two fasteners, but both achieve the same thing in the sense of insulation attachment. The profile of the two, you can see that the Insultite has a little less thread than the HP fastener. And then the drill bit, so the HP fastener, you'd use a square bit to drill. The Insultite fastener, you would use a number 3 Phillips to drill these fasteners into the deck. Insulation, when you are drilling the fastener into these deck types for a steel deck, we want it to penetrate the steel deck a minimum 3/4 inches, maximum 4 inches. And then for the wood deck, we say it should fasten through the deck a minimum 1 inch, maximum 4 inch. Okay, so those are the two differences between the deck types. Moving on, so we have fasteners for concrete decks as well. You can mechanically fasten insulation and mechanically fasten membrane through a concrete deck. It's a lot more labor intensive though, so you don't see it too often being done, especially now. Our flexible fast has grown tremendously. It's a lot it's user friendly, and it's a lot easier installation over a concrete deck. You don't see it too much anymore, but again, you still can mechanically fasten insulation and mechanically fasten membrane into a concrete deck. You would just got to make sure you would use these fasteners if you are going to be doing that. So the HD 1410 and the CD 10 fasteners for concrete decks. You still use the same plate, just got to make sure you use these fasteners. The HD 1410 fastener, it can be used with a drill, number 3 Phillips. You do got to pre-drill a hole before you install these fasteners. So we say, at least a minimum 3/16-inch diameter. But we do say if you do tend to, if you're seeing the fasteners breaking, we recommend going to maybe a wider drill bit, so like maybe a 7/16 bit, to help with that problem. And if you're still having problems, a lot of guys will resort to the CD10, which the CD10 is more of a hammer driven. Well, it's not more, it is a hammer driven fastener. Still got to use the CD10. We recommend a minimum of a 7/16 pilot hole, and then you hammer the CD10 in with a 2-pound short handle sledgehammer. So you see both, but because you know, if you have trouble with HD 1410, a lot of guys end up going to the CD10. But again, both perform, both corrosion resistant, which is good because you are going into a concrete deck that holds moisture. So you know, you want to make sure they're going to withstand that moisture and not wear over time. So they're good on that, and they are just a more heavy duty fastener, which is why you need to use these two for a concrete deck. When you are going into a concrete deck, piggybacking off what we talked about earlier with minimum penetration, you do need to go into the concrete deck a minimum of 1 inch for these fasteners. Lastly, so we do have other kind of deck types too. You know, we have lightweight concrete, we have gypsum and tectum decks. You know, you don't see these decks too often, but they are out there and they are treated differently. We're going to talk about that more so throughout these PowerPoints. But when you are mechanically fastened insulation, you know, you would have to use these plates and fasteners. So the HP Light Deck Fastener comes with a special plate. You know, the HP Light Deck Fastener is only for insulation attachment. So the plate's 3 inches, and then you have the fastener there. But the Gyp-Tech Fastener actually comes in 2 different sizes, one for membrane securement and also for insulation securement. So those are some of the differences there. Moving on, some more of the differences compared to the more common deck types that we were talking about. When it comes to the light deck fastener, this fastener needs to penetrate into the deck a minimum of 2 inches. Okay. If you're going to cement with fiber decks, you don't have to pre-drill, but if you're going into a gypsum deck, you would have to create a pilot hole before you know, installing this fastener, minimum 2 inches. And then for this fastener, a drill gun would be sufficient. Sorry. Oh. One second. There we go. Sorry, I lost my train of thought here. Yeah, so light deck fastener needs to penetrate minimum 2 inches. The Gyp-Tech fastener needs to fasten with a minimum 1.5 inch. Again, a pilot hole was necessary using a Gyp-Tech fastener, but the pilot hole must go in 2 inches depth, and then the Gyp-Tech fastener would go in 1.5 inches. So that's the difference between the two. And we're gonna get into fastening patterns here in a little bit and what you need to be aware of when it comes to these deck types. Okay. Also, when it comes to these deck types, we highly recommend you know, finding the minimum pull-out value, which should be 300 pounds when you use it for a mechanically fastened system. Again, it's something we don't require, but when it comes to deck types like this, or say you're doing a metal retrofit system over that lightweight metal deck, you know, pull-out values can be beneficial for you guys installation. But again, it's something that Carlisle would never require, but we recommend. Moving on. So this chart right here, so we have lots of charts in our spec book, guys. This chart right here, table 6, we like to show because it kind of covers a lot of ground that's for us in the sense of our standard warranty wind speed you usually see out there is a 20, 55 mile per hour. So table 6 here, which I'm about to show you, is a chart for a fully adhered system up to a 20-year warranty, and then it covers all wind speeds from 55 to 120 mile per hour wind speed. So we like to show this chart a lot for our like fastening patterns and stuff because it covers so much. So basically, that's what I want to show and show you how to read this. It's pretty simple. Again, so you already know, say you're doing a 15 or 20-year warranty. So this is up to 20 years, so 10, 15, 20-year warranty. Then you go to your wind speed. So say you're doing a 20-year, 72 mile per hour wind speed warranty. You're going to read the chart from left to right. So you're going to go into the box here to the left, right? 72 or 80 miles per hour, and say your minimum membrane underlayment is going to be 2-inch polyiso. And just to clarify that, guys, your minimum membrane underlayment is always going to be the very top layer of insulation, okay? Because you're going to typically have multiple layers staggered. What determines the fastening pattern is the top layer, though, okay? So going back to there, so 20 years, 72 mile per hour, you're installing a 2-inch standard polyiso, okay? Anything over 55, guys, you're gonna see a lot of our installations, or standard ISO, I should say, is ranges from 20 to 25 psi. If you look at, I'm backtracking here, and I apologize. You look in the 55 mile per hour chart, the 2-inch standard ISO, you see 20 psi. But as soon as you get higher than 55, going down to 72, you should be ordering the 25 psi board. So it's still standard 2-inch polyiso, but the psi is now different. Okay, then moving on, so we're still on a 20-year, 72 mile per hour wind speed warranty. You're doing 2-inch polyiso. You can use 8 plates and fasteners per 4x8 board, which is stating that right here. Okay, and that's a standard fastening pattern for a 2-inch board. But what I want to point out is, say you get over 90 miles per hour, say you're doing 100 miles per hour, there you still use a 2-inch polyiso board. Here it's stating that you should use 2-inch secure shield, which is still a polyiso board, which is with a different facer. You can see that this board now, even though it's 2 inches, now it's requiring you to do 16 plates and fasteners per 4x8 board. So we like to preach to, when we're talking about these charts here, that, you know, even though we have details, which we're going to show you here in a little bit, our A27 details, when it comes to determining your fastening pattern, we really recommend looking at this chart to determine what your fastening pattern should be, because there's lots of variables out there that's going to change your fastening patterns. And just for example, I just showed you there, you know, a standard 2-inch board, yes, usually requires 8 plates and fasteners. But if you have a wind speed greater than 90 miles per hour, you're going to do a 2-inch board with 16 plates and fasteners. So that can make things change. Other things you got to keep in mind is note number 1 down here is highlighted. For building heights greater than 50 foot, right? That's going to be another time where you're going to enhance your boards. No matter what board you're using, for your minimum membrane underlayment, you're going to enhance that 50% more plates and fasteners, right? 12 feet wide in from the perimeter. So it's another reason you're going to enhance your perimeter, or enhance your fastening pattern. And then another one, going back to gypsum and tectum decks, or lightweight concrete, or retrofit, existing metal roof. If you look at note number 3 under additional adhered design considerations, we have 4 main acceptable deck types. Steel, structural concrete, and our wood decks. But if you get into those other deck types, that's another time where you're always going to be required to do a minimum of 16 plates and fasteners, no matter what board you're using. So again, these charts are probably the best things to reference when it comes to determining your fastening patterns. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I don't think I have any questions on that. I did get a question a little bit ago, and that's why I paused, and I'm sorry. I'm going to try to answer that real quick for you guys. The question is, are HP fasteners required for reinforced perimeter strip? And yes, you could use HP fasteners for a rust strip. So EPDM, typically you're using an HP fastener for membrane securement. In that sense, yes, for a rust strip. TPO, depending on the plate, but either HPX or HP also can be used for your rust strip. In this sense, what you're calling is the reinforced perimeter strip. So hopefully that answers your question when it comes to being able to use an HP fastener for reinforced perimeter strip. Other than that, we're going to move on here, show you some of the details and fastening patterns and what they should look like. So fastening patterns can be in your field guides, and they can also be under our spec supplements, G-09-18, the installation attachment and details. So we have our standard fastening patterns. This one right here is our A27B. So pay attention. The A stands for fully adhered systems. Obviously you can see the little picture in the corner as well as a paint roller. That's also shown that's fully adhered. This is stating for a 2-inch or thicker ISO board, you can do 8 plates and fasteners. And this is what the detail is showing you. But what you want to pay heavily attention to, and going back to what we talked about last slide, is which we'll state here in the detail, note number 4 and note number 5. I'll read them off to you. Note number 4 states if a wind speed warranty greater than 55 miles per hour or a warranty greater than 20, you're going to need to enhance this board more than 8 plates and fasteners. And then note number 5 is saying kind of the same thing, but in a different sense, is this detail is not for use over any OSB, gypsum, cementitious wood fiber, lightweight concrete, or a steel deck that's thinner than 22 gauge, which would, in that sense, would be an existing, like a standing seam roof, like a metal retrofit system, like I talked about earlier. So again, 8 plates of fasteners per 4x8 board, no matter what board you're using, would not be acceptable over those kind of deck types. All right, so if you're going over those kind of deck types, you would resort back to your 16 plates and fasteners, which we call the diamond pattern. All right, and typically because the thicker boards typically yield better wind uplift performance with less fasteners and plates. And if the thicker board just doesn't need that many plates and fasteners typically. But again, when you're getting into the higher wind speed and warranties or a special deck type, we want you to enhance those plates and fasteners. So going back to this, standard detail, but we heavily recommend referencing those charts instead. This detail, we like to kind of promote more so of just plate placement and what it should look like. Not so much going off of this in the sense of how many plates and fasteners is required. The chart will let you guys know that. So moving on, again, A27A is actually, besides the 8 plates and fasteners per board, the A27A, we actually like to say this is one of our bread and butter fastening patterns because you typically see it on most systems because of so many different variables on why. But in the field, you might hear it be called the diamond pattern. And that's because the plates in the middle, there's 8 plates and fasteners in the middle and 8 plates and fasteners on the perimeter of the board. The ones in the middle are shaped as a diamond, so you might hear that sometimes for the diamond pattern. Typically, you're going to see this fastening pattern on a cover board. A half inch board is always required to have 16 plates and fasteners, typically. And then again, the different deck types. If you're going to a special deck type, 16 is going to be required. Anything over 90, 16 is going to be required. Building height higher than 50, typically you're going to be doing close to 16 or more. So you tend to see this fastening pattern a good bit. All right. So moving on here. So that's for fully adhered systems, okay? We do have fastening patterns that pertain to mechanically fastened systems. So when I'm talking about mechanically fastened systems, I'm talking about mechanically fasten our membrane. So in that sense, there's already plates of fasteners going through the membrane and then also through our insulation and deck. So there's lots of plates of fasteners going through insulation. You typically don't need anything more than 8 plates and fasteners. The installation fastening patterns is going to be minimal compared to what we see in fully adhered systems. So we have 2 mechanically fastened installation details. You can see here on the detail itself, it's changed to now from an A to an MF. The MF stands for the mechanically fastened system. You can see the number is the same though. 27 is always our installation attachment details. So the detail on the left, you see on the bottom again, it says up to a 15-year warranty. So this is a mechanically fastened system, up to 15-year warranty. Then it breaks down to either new construction or re-roof with a tear-off or a re-roof with no tear-off. And that determines your fastening pattern. So if you're doing a new construction or a re-roof tear-off, so it's an existing roof that you tore off, you can do down to 4 plates and fasteners per 4x8 board. But if you're doing a re-roof, no tear-off, you got to do 8 plates and fasteners. Okay, which I think a common scenario is if guys are doing a re-roof mechanically fastened system, you typically, and as long as the roof's in good shape and the deck's in good shape, you typically see this scenario. So a lot of times you do see the 8 plates and fasteners per board on a mechanically fastened system. The MF27B detail is showing if it was exceeding 15 years. So 20 years or greater. Breaks it down again, new construction versus no tear off. The new construction is going to be 6 plates and fasteners per 4x8 board. And then again, if you're doing a re-roof, no tear off, it's going to be 8 plates and fasteners. So the way I always say it and try to help guys remember it easily is if you're doing a re-roof, no tear off, it's automatic 8 plates and fasteners. Simple as that. It's when it gets down to the tear offs and new constructions that you can either go 4 or 6. And then installation attachment on a metal retrofit, you heard me say that a few times now throughout the webinar, is basically metal retrofit. If you don't know what it is basically taking a single ply roof, one of our systems, and putting it over an existing metal roof. In that sense, there's 2 fastening patterns you need to follow. This one's showing if you're doing a mechanically fastened system retrofit, which is probably the more common scenario, versus a fully adhered retrofit, which is completely acceptable, but you just don't see it as often. If you're doing mechanically fastened retrofit, the fastening pattern is a minimum of 8 plates and fasteners. If you're doing a fully adhered retrofit, it's a minimum of 16 plates and fasteners and nothing less. And that's going back to what I said earlier, because that metal roof is a thinner gauge metal, we want a minimum of 16 plates and fasteners. And that's another scenario where we would recommend a pull test and find that minimum pull out value. So moving on there, so that's mechanically fastened insulation. Very common scenario, used a lot out in the field in most cases. But we do have other options of securing your insulation, okay? And it's becoming more and more popular, especially over concrete decks, and that is our flexible fast adhesive, okay? Comes in various sizes. It comes in the whole way down to like a dual cartridge, which you would use a gun. That's this one right here in the middle, this little guy. Then we have the dual tanks. The dual tanks is probably the most popular version of this adhesive because it's very user-friendly. You buy the set, everything comes with it, the gun, the hoses, the tips, the tools, and then when you're done with it, you can throw it away. Very, very simple. Then we have our 5, 15, and 50-gallon drums. And that makes a contractor's life easy in the sense of you get a lot of square footage out of it if you have the proper equipment. Now, this equipment, just so you guys know, we don't sell through a Carlisle channel, but we would help you, your sales rep, our fleece back team, if you were trying to locate a piece of equipment like these, we would help you purchase that and also get you guys trained on it. Our fleece back team has a lot of knowledge on these pieces of equipment and would be more than happy to help you guys if you're ever interested in these pieces of equipment. They are pretty expensive, and you would need these if you wanted to do the 5, the 15, or 50-gallon drums. So starting from the left to the right, the Patriot Junior and the Easy Loader, There's more of the cheaper ones, and there's a smaller version. They would be able to run the 5 and the 15-gallon drums. But if you ever wanted to get to your 50-gallon drums, you would have to have either the Patriot, the Hawk, or the Predator to run those big pieces of equipment. The Hawk and the Predator actually is a heated spray rig. So typically you see this adhesive being sprayed as a bead applied, definitely the most common scenario. But these pieces of equipment, the Hawk and the Predator, actually has the ability to spray a full spray. So if you've ever seen pictures or you've ever been on a roof where applicators are spraying this and they have like the hazmat suits on, that's because they're probably spraying a full spray. And that's just a safety precaution when using that. So anyway, the biggest benefit, to keep it simple, is you get a lot more square footage, obviously, out of the bigger versions of the adhesive. My recommendation and what we teach our guys that come through our classes is, if you are to buy one of these pieces of equipment, have a guy designated to learn this piece of equipment, get trained on it, and know how to maintain it. I think as these pieces of equipment are great machines, where things go wrong is not being able to maintenance them and not knowing what to do and stuff like that. So I highly recommend getting your guys trained on these pieces of equipment, and our fleeceback team can help you guys get trained on them. Okay, so that's my advice to you guys when it comes to buying a spray rig. And I do believe we are putting together a spray rig webinar, hopefully in the future. If not, when things open back up, we will have a spray rig training available for you guys. Moving on. So another piece of equipment that you actually can buy through a Carlisle channel is now these power blankets. We show this here with the dual tanks because these dual tanks, and also the Cab Grip 3, which I think you guys have learned about already too, very, very popular bond adhesive. With these tanks, you want to maintain the temperature, and I think maintain is the key word here. I think where guys go wrong when these started coming out, guys were keeping the tanks, weren't very cautious of the tanks dropping in temperature, and they had put these blankets on thinking that they would bring the temperature back to room temperature very quickly, and that's not the case. Although it will do that, it's going to take a lot longer. We recommend these blankets in the sense of to maintain that room temperature between 70 to 90 degrees. I think temperature is a huge factor in the performance of this adhesive. I'm a huge fan of our flexible fasten adhesive. I think it's a great product. We just got to know, I think for the applicator purposes, you got to know what you're doing with it, and you got to take precaution to those little things like the temperature and a couple of other things that we're going to talk about in the next slide. So power blankets will help you with that, and it's very easy to use. You just plug it in. There's no settings, there's nothing, no buttons to it. You plug it in, it brings your tanks up to a minimum of 70 degrees, and it keeps them between 70 and 90. And that will get the best performance out of your adhesive. And honestly, what happens to the adhesive if it does drop those temperatures, it affects the propellant in it. And that's why you don't want it to drop in temperature, because it affects the ratio of the adhesive. Then it's a part A, part B. They got to mix equally. And once that starts to not happen, and that's where problems go wrong with the adhesive. So it ends up being more of a user error rather than the adhesive itself. So very, very important. And there's also an incentive of these power blankets, guys. If you buy so many dual tanks, or if you buy so many Cab Grip 3 tanks, we will give you a set of power blankets for free. Like I said, there's an incentive program out there. If you're interested, look into it with your sales rep. They will point in the right direction. And if you want to buy extra power blankets, you can buy them through a Carlisle channel. Here's a pamphlet. You can get this information online, but just real quick, here's our fleeceback team. We have Austin Culp, who is our product manager, and then we have 4 specialists that are very, very knowledgeable and always willing to help you guys with whatever you need when it comes to spray equipment, the adhesive itself, our fleeceback membranes, anything. These are the guys you would want to contact, and they're located throughout the country. You know, so we got Austin Cobb as the manager, then Earl and Steven Johnson more take care of the West Coast, and then we have Brian and Eric here on the East Coast. So, but feel free to ever reach out to them if you ever have any questions on our adhesives or spray rigs. So moving on to the detail itself. So you saw with mechanically fastening installation, you know, lots of different fastening patterns. You know, anywhere from 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 16. And then when you start enhancing even more, you can get up to 24 and 32 in some cases. Luckily, with the flexible fast adhesive, either it's 12, 6, or 4 inches on center, usually in a bead applied application, which is pretty simple. Probably most common scenario when it comes to standard warranties and wind speeds, you typically see 12 in the field and then 6 on the perimeter, or 6 on center throughout the whole job. The 4 inches on center is considered the full spray. And going back to that chart, I guess I didn't really point that out. Going back to the chart we talked about earlier, if you look to the right of those fastening patterns, the number of plates of fastening is required. It talks about bead spacing if you were going this route. And if you saw the FS down there, the FS stands for full spray. Full spray is 4 inches on center. So full spray would be for, you know, kind of the same thing as if you're doing 16 or more plates and fasteners. You know, anything over 90, taller buildings, higher warranties and wind speeds, 4 inches on center is going to be what you would be doing. So pretty simple. Not much to it there. One note that we'd like to point out to you guys is our note number 3. Previously unexposed asphalt or residue must be primed with Carlisle cab grip or 702 LV primer. This is a huge thing to remember, guys, because we do a lot of tear-offs, a lot of old built-up roofs out there that we're tearing off and we're putting our new systems on. And what we found was, because flexible fast adhesive really can go to most substrates, there's not really too many restrictions with it. But what we did find is if they are doing a tear-off and you're taking this adhesive to that tear-off and there's that unexposed asphalt is like oily or shiny to it, you should be sealing that up with cab grip or 702 primer. Basically, what it dries those oils out, and it won't affect our adhesive. So that's really, really important if you're doing a tear off. So it looks something like that. You see that shine to it? You should be, again, our contractor should be sealing that up with cab grip, letting it completely dry, and then you can go ahead and take the flexible fast adhesive right over that substrate once that cab grip or 702 dries up. So the actual application of flexible fast adhesive, again, going back to temperature is such a huge factor in this adhesive. And another huge factor is where sometimes contractors go wrong is not waiting for the adhesive to develop the string time. All right. So you've learned, bond adhesive primer, it should flash off, become tacky, and not transfer to a dry bare, your dry bare knuckle. Here, and again, you see in the picture, they're wearing a glove. Highly recommend wearing a glove because the flexible fast, does not come off things very well. You want to develop that string time. So what's again focusing on the dual tanks, about 2 to 2.5 minutes, you start to see string time. And then you have about 3 to 5 minute window of string time, which is a huge benefit for the flexible fast adhesive compared to our standard fast, which we are now discontinuing. But anyway, once you get that string time, that's telling you that it is ready to go, and you can go ahead and put the boards in. Right? Typically with this application, you guys will see that contractors will install 4x4s instead of 4x8s. 4x8s is allowed. If you're doing 4x8 so, you can only install 4x8s if you're doing 6 on center or 4 inches on center. If you're doing a 12 inches on center spacing, 4x4s is required, and that's because of the way it embeds into the adhesive. You'll see with this application, corners of the boards tend to sometimes not be as flush as some may like, and 4x4s will help prevent that. So that's why we like to see the 4x4 into a 12-inch on center. But anyway, you put the board in, give it about a minute or so. Then you're going to walk the board in so it embeds into the adhesive. And then you want to walk it in and take a 150-pound segmented roller, which is very important. Okay. The weighted roller is required. When this two-part adhesive came out a while ago, a long time ago, we were allowing just like weighted buckets, 5-gallon buckets, which you still see that a lot out there after the fact. But you guys need to know that the 150-pound roller is required for this installation. So then once it's rolled in, we do say about the flexible fast is fully cured out and set up after 4 hours. So once you walk on it and roll it in, you shouldn't be pulling up on it anyway, but you guys should know that it takes about 4 hours to finally cure out. One thing that I also want to point out too that guys lose track of, when contractors get going, they're trying to get a lot of square feet in. Our insulation boards, when you're putting them in, you should want to put them in somewhat gentle and not put them in rough and kick the boards in to close that gap. Gotta be cautious of that because it can harm the solid structure of the adhesive and break it down and it go back to its original wet form. Okay, so put the boards in something gentle. That's why it seems silly to have two guys put boards in because they're super light, but two guys can be more efficient in the sense of putting the boards in more gentle. One thing I want to point out that I didn't point out between the two or the different versions of the adhesive, the dual tanks, when you're spraying that adhesive, it comes out as a foam already. So you should be looking for the size of the bead should be 1.5 inches. If you're using like the dual cartridge or if you're using a spray rig, they actually come out as a wet bead. So there's the two differences there. So if you come out as a wet bead, you're aiming for about 1/2 to 3/4 inch wide, and it's going to rise to 1.5 inches. But the dual tanks already comes out as a foam. It's still going to rise, but already comes out as a foam. So you should be aiming for 1.5 inch size bead. Moving on here. So we have other ways or other insulation out here. This is a little not as common, but say you're doing a retrofit job, going back to we talked about that a little bit earlier. On a retrofit system, okay, metal retrofit, you got to fill those flutes up, right? So typically what you see is our EPS insulation being custom cut to whatever size flute you have, and that they would be loose laid into this gap, and then you'd have your cover board or top layer insulation mechanically fastened through the flute fill and the metal deck. The EPS is a lot more cost efficient and easier to work with, but we do have the option of pre-cutting our standard insole-based polyiso into straight cut or bevel cut. Not seen as not seen as often. Like I said, typically if you're doing a flute fill, you're typically seeing EPS or XPS insulation as a flute fill. This is what this is showing here. These can get custom cut to any size that you need. And then moving on here, not going to spend too much time on this, guys. Tapered insulation. We actually have a whole program developed to train you guys on tapered insulation. So if you guys are really interested in tapered designs, or tapered insulation for that matter, like I said, we have a course coming out that you guys can sign up for to learn more about this. But real quick, tapered insulation is designed to direct water either to a drain or a scupper. Basically, taper systems is to help keep your roofs from ponding water, is basically what they're designed to do. And there's so many different designs out there, which a lot of guys don't realize. There's actually a lot of thought that goes into these design plans. Here are some of the more our most common design plans, and some can be really expensive, and some the more expensive ones are obviously probably going to perform the best, and then the least expensive ones might not drain as best, but there's also nothing wrong with those tapered plans either. They can vary. But again, it's up to the building owner and the contractor to decide what tapered plan to go with. From an inspection standpoint, we're going to make sure that the installation is secured properly, but not necessarily, the tapered plan is something that it's up to the roofer to make sure they're following the tapered plan as best as possible. But again, this is just a little bit of a teaser, just letting you guys know that we do offer tapered plans. We actually offer a lot of different things when it comes to tapered installation. That if you guys are really interested in this, I highly recommend signing up for the tapered 101 and 201 course that will be coming out down the road, and it actually will be an in-house training as well, and possibly a webinar, depending on what the future looks like. So highly recommend that. Other than that, wrapping everything up here, I have one other question, going back to, I think, the flexible fast adhesive. I had a question that says, do you mean wait 4 hours before gluing the rubber? No. So I just was pointing that out. It's really, once the board embeds into the flexible fast adhesive, I think we say maybe, wait 30 minutes before you proceed with the next layer of insulation, or, gluing the membrane. But the 4 hours, you're not going to have to wait 4 hours to glue the membrane. It's going to be, believe it or not, the flexible fast actually sets up pretty good the first hour. But we've just, with our testing, we say 4 hours. So hopefully that clears that up. Yeah, you can keep roof, and if you're in theory too, when once you're out there roofing, you're doing runs. By the time you start going back to your next layer of insulation, or if you get ready to do your membrane, that insulation has been set in that adhesive long enough that you wouldn't have to worry about waiting. So it's not really going to affect your productivity or anything like that. I just like to point that out. Sometimes the guys, they've came across that and they thought it was something wrong with the adhesive. Like I said, you really shouldn't be pulling up on your boards or your fleece back membrane right after you're putting it in. That's not good. Some guys do, and they think it's the adhesive, but don't realize that it does take up to 4 hours for it to set up. But yes, hopefully that answers that question. But other than that, yeah, thanks for signing up for today, guys. Again, this is just a little piece of information that we offer in our 100 through 500 level courses. You guys will be able to get this recording on our website here shortly after, the next couple of days. If you want to reference anything that I had talked about. If you have any questions now, or if you have any questions that come up, if you think of something afterwards, feel free to, email the training info at carlisleccm.com, or email me personally. That's fine. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Hopefully this covered a good amount of stuff that you guys were interested in. Again, this was geared towards basically the installation for the most part. If you're interested in designs of tapered systems, highly recommend signing up for our tapered program. It's going to be coming out here shortly. It's one of our newer programs. So the guys that teach that are highly educated on tapered plans. So it's a really good course. Other than that, keep an eye out for the EPDM 201 and the TPO 201 coming out here in the next couple of weeks. Other than that, again, yeah, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, and enjoy the rest of your week.